Okay, so our main topic, Bridget, is a job paper that was online that Ethan Malik, one of our favorites, posted to his LinkedIn page, and it's called "Making Talk Cheap: LLMs and the Devaluation of Written Work." It's written by two professors, Anais Galden from Dartmouth College's Tuck School of Business and Jesse Silbert from Princeton University. And would love it if you'd be willing to describe what Anais and Jesse, or Galden and Silbert were describing in this paper that they wrote and why it's relevant to
Yeah.
our listeners.
Yeah, I think this is a really, really interesting paper, and, even though it's not aimed at lawyers or for lawyers, I think you and I both, right away said, like, "Wow, this is pretty significant and worth putting in our main, section of our podcast." And I just wanna, before I get into the paper, shout out to Ethan Malik for, like, pulling all of the pretty interesting research to others, just as, like, if anybody's wants to go off and, like, look at 2 others, I'm sure you saw these as well. The one, he posted about, an economist who has a job talk paper that is showing how LLMs help, like, first gen students with all of the sort of unwritten rules of success in education and also in sort of, um, helping get your first job, how they close a gap that previously was not closable by, all the things like internships and relationships with, professors and clubs and why clubs matter and all these things that LLMs can actually make a difference, for folks who just don't know anything about those kind of unwritten rules of success. I thought that paper was fascinating, like really, really interesting. And the other one that I really paused on was, it was a post about how unprepared we are in academia to evaluate new science and new research if in fact, see that one? Yeah, and he's not wrong, right? Like our methodology for evaluating and confirming like new science and new research is slow and methodical, and it moves at the pace of humans. And if we start seeing new scientific breakthroughs by large language models in 2026, which is what we're told by some of the lab leaders now, we'll see at least minor breakthroughs and then probably more significant ones in 2027 and certainly by 2028. Like, how do we keep up with kicking the tires of that new science and new research? I mean, maybe there's like maybe we take our human processes and build AI processes out of them, but I think we want humans to be making sure science works, right? Or, science, the map, the sciences.
I saw that post and first I thought it was so insightful, but also, I mean, all the talk about whether there's an AI bubble and what's gonna happen with it, and this is for a whole other podcast, but I've I've just been so confused about the last month of product announcements and rollouts and, like, first there's erotica one week, and then, like, the next week we're gonna have scientific breakthroughs. It made me think of, like, post 2008 when I would go to the King of Prussia Mall and there's, like, a Neiman Marcus, and then there's a pawn shop right next door, and you're like, "What is happening with the world?" And that but also, if part of the business model is this selling of the agents that are going to come up with these breakthrough scientific innovations and selling them for, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars, how does that work for the reasons that Ethan's pointing out? Um, I don't understand how that math. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's, ultimately just gonna continue to be a a barrier for a while, or I don't know. I think my brain can't work it through. I hope Ethan's working on it because I read that and I was like, "Oh, we wanna get the benefit of the new science, like, in the new medicine as soon as possible. Like, my bones are only getting weaker and I'm only getting older. Like, I want the new science."
but it does make the Wharton paper again because it's sort of like the investments are there, the technology's there, the enthusiasm's there, the bottleneck are the humans, and
Yes.
the bottleneck in his post are the humans.
Are the humans.
Um,
Yeah.
and and a lot I can't remember which of our favorite thinkers it was who talked just last week about the AGI already being here in many respects, but until there are systems to plug it into, it's sort of irrelevant, um, because we're just not prepared from an infrastructure standpoint, from a social standpoint.
Not prepared to process it and, like, make it meaningful, right? Back to the paper, and apologies for the, like, off script, like, but plug again for just following Ethan to find the most, like, interesting, I think, papers that are and other ideas, around this technology. Okay, so this paper was super interesting to us, because it is about the way, large language models can, or do, devalue written communication, because all of a sudden they put everybody on equal footing, or they remove the barrier of effort, that made writing valuable. So, in most legal jobs, being a good writer is pretty important to success. Not all, but to many, being a good writer is pretty important to success. And before LLMs, writing was valuable. I mean, not only in legal, but generally, because it was hard. It's like hard to make it clear. It's hard to make it sing. It's hard to make it not boring, not repetitive, like well crafted and strong analysis. Like good writers really stood out. We spent a lot of time teaching law students how to write legal memos and legal briefs and how to write them well. Law firms spend a lot of time, like in litigation practices, spend a lot of time working with their junior associates on getting their writing, improving their writing and turning them into excellent writers. And now all of a sudden, after this technology, anybody can produce very polished writing. And so that cost barrier has collapsed and written work becomes really, really cheap. And that means it's harder to assess quality of a candidate um, or an argument even, if everybody can kind of produce basically the same quality of writing. So there's like it's a super interesting paper and goes obviously into some pretty specific examples of what this means, but there are ways in which writing has always been a like a signal for a lot of different ways in which we think about quality, right? So writing is a way we measured how someone's quality of thought was. Like if you're a good thinker, um, you showed that in your good writing. Your expertise was something you showed off in your writing. Hard work, I'm always I will tell you as somebody who who employed many different clerks over 10 years on the bench, I could tell when somebody put serious effort and work into a memo that I was reading. And I could tell you when I saw the opposite. That didn't happen very often, but you could certainly tell. And it has been, I think, historically viewed as a way for evening the playing field, right? Like you didn't necessarily have to know the secret handshake to get into the club if you were an excellent writer. Both your cover letter and in your writing sample. I mean, when you went to law school, did you still always have to send a writing sample to every job? I did. Like that was what we set. Not just for clerkships, but every job wanted to see a writing sample. That was really the way we measured quality. And 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 some used to, but some would argue that it was a way that you could even the playing field because somebody who didn't come from a background where they had an easy entry into a prestigious legal career could find their way in if they were an excellent writer. It was a signal of so much quality across the board. And now without that, the question is how do we evaluate quality? Like what are the new ways in which we can measure quality? And what will it mean? What will it mean for the labor market? And I think you and I are sort of interested in what it will mean for the legal labor market, but this paper is obviously broader than that. And then in terms of how lawyers advance throughout their careers, writing has also been another, at least in most careers, an important kind of gating item, right? People didn't usually advance to the top of their careers without being pretty masterful with the written word. Even if they did it less and less, like as a leader, if it became less and less a part of their day-to-day job, it was certainly a gating item in just about every legal vertical that I can think of. And now it's kind of disrupted, and we're like in this weird phase where everybody can produce pretty polished written product in lots of different formats. So there's a set of interesting questions about what that means, what it will mean for again, the labor market, and I think we should focus a little bit on the legal labor market, but also maybe what does it mean for legal writing that is impactful to legal decision making. So in most courts, a lot of arguments are made in writing. Not all. Sometimes they're just orally, and maybe that's a better way of evaluating quality now. But briefs in appellate courts, in motions, in trial courts, are kind of the main currency for, winning or losing in a dispute. And so that changes maybe as well. And there's maybe some good news there that I could imagine. But also it'll be it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.